we're dealing with a public health crisis in St. Paul when it comes to opioid overdoses, and there's not a single person in City Hall who sits on City Council or sits in the mayor's office who is a public health professional and has worked with the people who are suffering. You know, I have been at encampment support meeting, I've done mutual aid, I've been at encampment evictions. That's actually the first place I met Melvin Carter. I met Mayor Carter at an encampment eviction. There's no one in this race who has spent more time in the neighborhood addressing the problems of the neighborhood than I have.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, here we are. We're entering St. Paul on the Wedge Live podcast. Is this a first? I can't remember. I don't think the podcast has ever been to St. Paul. I'm here with Cole Hanson. There's a special election for Ward 4 City Council in St. Paul, and Cole Hanson is one of the candidates. Thank you for riding with me and showing me around St. Paul.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This is one of the routes I run every week. So it's familiar to me. Hopefully it'll become familiar to everybody else.
Hopefully we can lose the car traffic at some point. We're crossing the Marshall Avenue Bridge, or is this the Lake Street Bridge? What's it called?
We can call it the middle.
So what's going on in St. Paul? What are the big issues in Ward 4?
From my perspective and the folks I talk to at the doors, it's affordability. You know, I'm a renter myself, so, you know, affordability when it comes to rents, it's getting pretty challenging. Even for homeowners, property taxes are climbing at a really outrageous rate. I've talked to folks where their year-over-year property taxes have gone up 60%. And it's boxing people out of home ownership, it's boxing people out of apartments. It's getting tough.
We turning left here?
Yep, so we want to turn left here.
Okay.
So then it'll get us down to the Riverway.
So I'm going to be doing some episodes on Summit Avenue. That's not in Ward 4, right?
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is.
Summit Avenue is pretty unique. It has its own organization and thing called SARPA. It's an old George Latimer project because it runs through so many different wards in St. Paul. There's no way to keep there wasn't a way to keep a single vision. Yeah, we'll go south here.
So why is that not settled? Why are we not done with that?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the folks who are interested in historic preservation, they got a good point. You know, it's the longest stretch of Victorian housing in the U.S., from my understanding, and it's pretty unique. And a lot of the trees, I mean, we can take Summit Avenue if you like.
No, I'm going to be riding Summit Avenue with another person, and it's a miserable bike lane, and so I don't want to ride it any more than I have to.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? I took my daughter to Grand Old Day this last year, and she was in the bike trailer, and she was bouncing around left and right. The bike lane, you're right. It's not good for anybody. And
the worst.
There's folks worried about the health of 900 some trees. It's
right.
It's a toss-up. The biggest thing for me is that the city hasn't been entirely honest with anybody in the area with regards to disclosures. There was just a recent lawsuit against the city about documents and disclosures related to the project,
right.
And the city lost.
Yeah, but that's a data practices issue, and obviously, as Chet Wedgley, your chief meteorologist here at Wedge Live, I believe in disclosure. But that's a separate issue from will the project take out all the trees? Any street reconstruction project threatens trees by definition because you're digging up the street. So will you be a council member who supports projects like that? What do you think of the project?
I mean, look, I'm looking forward to a safer summit to ride on my bike. At this point, the project's gone through the county, it's gone through the Met Council. It was approved almost unanimously by the last council. I'm not sure what the next Ward 4 council member is going to be able to do about it to change it.
Right.
Ongoing projects, I don't know, a city is made for people. So if we're not looking at our infrastructure from the perspective of how can we use it to support people, then what are we building it for? We need to make sure that our streets are safe, our bike paths are safe for everybody. If we can save trees and make positive impacts, plant more trees, it's great. We shouldn't tear them down if it's unreasonable, but we gotta build for the people who live here and the people who are going to live here next.
Yeah. So have I nailed you down on whether you're for it or against it? Or are you saying it's not relevant to who the next Ward 4 council member is?
I'm not sure if it's going to be relevant because it feels like the door is already closed on it.
So for people who are like, I want to know what this guy is going to be like if a controversy, because street projects are always controversial. So if it won't be this one, it'll be the next one. So I think it would be useful to know how would you have decided on this one?
Well, I think if we can make minimum impact, that's ideal. I think of the just kind of cost savings we get from not tearing up the entire street, trying to tear all this stuff and make it different. But at the same time, we're on this bike path right now. It's not ideal compared to a well-maintained road. You can just look at the difference between the two. So, I don't know. When I think about the Cleveland Avenue project over near the U of M, that's a different story. Because that was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be fixed, sorted out in a relationship with the University of Minnesota, and now the trees are replanted right away. It's...
Do you think this project will be handled any differently? We haven't even gotten to it.
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
That's the thing, is I hope so. It's a big opportunity.
Right. How do you feel about the I-94 Twin Cities Boulevard?
Now that is something I'm pretty excited about. I'm a big supporter of the Twin Cities Boulevard because it's a river of poison. I'm a public health educator. You live near the freeway, your life's shorter. And for our black neighbors and folks who descend from Rondo, they were robbed by the people who built the freeway. So, the Twin Cities Boulevard, for me, is not only a bold opportunity to try something different, to remove this really, really dangerous part of our city, but it's also a way to reconnect our city. The safest way to get north and south in Ward 4 on your bike is either Fairview or a pedestrian bridge somewhere along the way. It's never crossing one of the major streets. And Fairview is only safer because it goes under the freeway. Anything that goes over the freeway is treacherous. It's noisy, cars are speeding by. I've liked what I've seen out of open streets, and I'm frustrated. I was in the Pioneer Press a couple times talking about the impact of 94 on my family. I used to live closer to it. I could hear it in my sleep. I think the least we could do is have MnDOT study and provide the information we need to know whether the Twin Cities Boulevard is viable, because they asked us. They put it on the table.
Yeah, the way it feels like MnDOT is running away from the very real public health problem, the pollution
100%.
problem, the poison problem, doesn't even want to acknowledge the trade-offs, has me concerned. Another thing that has me concerned is this rain. Okay, are you a zoning reform guy?
To what extent? We already just did a whole bunch of it.
Did that guy scold us for not being in the street?
Probably.
What is the rule? I'm not familiar. Should
Well,
we be
the
in the
striping and the signage is not necessarily clear. In some parts of this trail, it is bike and pedestrian. In some parts, it's not. There's a bike lane on one side of Mississippi River Boulevard, but not on the other. A lot of fundamental challenges.
Okay, I hope he didn't see your yard sign because
Well,
it could spoil your campaign.
what do you do?
Cole Hanson here menacing pedestrians. I totally blanked on your zoning reform answer. I hope it was a good one.
Well, no, the question for me is what more reform? Because we've already readjusted our entire zoning code a few years ago.
So you think we're in a good place?
I think we're in a good place. I think there's some spots to touch and adjust, but I don't think we're in a revolutionary change everything phase.
Okay, and you think the changes that were made were good ones?
Broadly speaking, I mean, the thing I'm a fan of is the traditional zoning category. I like that it's framed as traditional, meaning this is how things used to be, which is you would
Right.
have corner stores.
Yeah.
You would have corner grocery. You travel to any city that people, always rant and rave about, your Berlins, your Paris, your London. The place that people like living there, and those places are livable because you don't have to take a train, take a bus to go to a grocery store. You got your corner Späti, you've got your corner store, you go wherever you need to. It's right there. And it used to be this way in St. Paul. You can actually look around and see old corner stores that have been converted to duplexes or housing because when the business closed, they couldn't keep running it as a business.
Woo! So this is not a great path, and also I wouldn't want to be in that bike lane.
It's an exact example of what I'm talking about. I mean, you look at, and we got somebody coming up here, right?
Is there a shelter
Now,
we
one
can
of the main
take?
things I talk about with
Is there a
folks.
shelter we can take anywhere close by to cover up?
Yeah, there's once we get to
I'm
Ford,
gonna hide under this tree. So the Cub Foods closure in the Midway, is that in Ward 4?
Sure is.
Well, that's a real shame.
Yeah.
I'm big on grocery stores and transit, and I saw a story where a man in a little motorized wheelchair, been in one for decades, and the story was like distance matters to this man. Every day he leaves his home, and if he can't just drive to the next
Right.
nearest grocery store. And what do you do? I think I saw municipal grocery stores listed as a priority on your website. Did
Absolutely.
I see that?
Yeah, I mean, municipal grocery stores, just talking grocery and transit, first off, in Ward 4, we have two really good examples and two really bad examples of grocery store and transit. Two really good examples, we have Aldi at Lexington and University, which is not oriented towards the train, but is right next to the train platform. Very easy to get in, get out. Next, you have Fresh Time over a little bit further to the west, closer to Minneapolis. Might even be in Minneapolis, it's pretty close. But it's right on the edge, You would notice if you just hopped on the train and hopped off, because you hop off the train and you walk into a grocery store. Very easy. The two that are bad examples of transit and grocery stores are the Cub Foods that's closing and Target. Right. They're oriented towards a suburban community. They have huge parking lots in front of them, and they're a half or quarter mile away from the transit platform, even though they're right at the Hamlin station. So there's right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it, and I'm proposing municipal grocery because not only is it a way for us to democratically do it the right way, but the rules and statutes are already written into Minnesota law for municipalities to run businesses. You look at municipal liquor, the same rules are applying to municipal cannabis up in Anoka with some adjustments. There's no reason we couldn't, as a city, scratch out liquor and replace it with grocery and run it in a way that is not necessarily the same as any traditional grocery model, but is run to meet the needs of our residents, like we build our water infrastructure to meet the needs of our residents.
So I'm a little bit, there's a lot of people who are skeptical of this, and I think I'm among them. I don't mind studying it. Obviously, food deserts are a real problem, and the people who want to study it are not bad or wrong for wanting to study it and try to solve the problem. Just the idea that maybe a city could run a grocery store of the quality of Aldi, I am skeptical of that. Aldi is my gold standard for grocery stores.
Sure. Well, you guys got a nice one over there.
Yeah.
It's a nice one.
But then, there are food deserts who would take literally anything.
And I think that's something where, on your side of the river, I think the questions that the Minneapolis City Council is asking, especially around the community of Cedar Riverside, the University of Minnesota, is really important. Because that is a food desert for, your private grocery. You've got small community grocers, you've got grocers to serve the East African community, right? But there's not a lot of single serve, this is where I go get to my groceries, or to places near the U. That's one of the reasons why it sounds like, Councilmember Wansley is looking into it, because her constituents are asking. in St. Paul, we look at our downtown and we have folks who live down there, they work down there, especially with the governor's return to work mandates, for state workers. And there's no private grocery down there at all, other than maybe 1 or 2 corner stores in the entire downtown. There's nothing serving that community. And people move down there on the premise that it would be walkable, that they could age in that place and have a walkable, engageable community. And now they're left schlepping all the way to Lexington or to the suburbs to spend their money elsewhere. There's no competition. I think that's what makes it a really unique proposition to study. I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm saying we need to ask the question and investigate it. We need to give the idea a try because nothing else is working, because there's no competition. In any other city, you might be looking at competing with private grocery. In downtown St. Paul, there's nothing. It's a perfect opportunity to try something new.
Are there other ways to do this aside from municipal grocery store? Let's say the study shows this would be really difficult and unlikely to succeed. Where would you go next to try to fix the problem?
Well, I mean, the city's already trying to entice private grocers to come. That's a conversation I've had in the background with a couple council members already. To mixed results. They're working on it. There's reaching out to the co-ops. That's one thing many people have come to me about. It's like, hey, why don't we reach out to the co-ops? But they have business interests too. If Mississippi market wanted to be there, they could be. But they're not, because it probably doesn't make sense for them and their business model. We look at the St. Paul Farmers Market, an incredible opportunity to engage with local farmers, local growers, especially our Hmong farmers in Ramsey County. And that's also on the other side of downtown. So are we going to pick up an entire farmers market and move it to that location? Is there a way to coordinate that sort of thing? And how do we keep it affordable? Again, I think there's lots of different options. People have been working on food security in St. Paul and Ramsey County for years and years and years. I used to sit on the Food and Nutrition Commission with the county. There's a lot of great champions who've been working on it, but we've never had a chance to try something different like this because the crisis was so bad. I think we got to give a bold option a try, at least a consideration, because worst thing that happens, a business is going to come in and fill the spot while we're looking. That's the worst thing that happens. Best case scenario, we succeed. But the folks who live down there deserve us trying.
Do you think it's let up? Do you think we can proceed?
Seems like it.
Okay, let's do that. I'm still shaken up from getting scolded. Deeply shaken up. There's no scolding like St. Paul path scolding, I think.
We're tough but fair. I always say Minneapolis is a little big city. St. Paul is a big small town. Our politics and demeanor work out that way.
So rent control, St. Paul tried it and has been, you've been the poster child in Minneapolis for why we should never, ever do it. And do you defend the way it was done? Do you think it should have stayed the way it was when it was first implemented?
I think we can't talk about rent stabilization without talking about the whole story of it. I mean, first, the premise, it's unaffordable to rent here. People are getting extreme rent hikes. That leads to a referendum, huge turnout. Vote succeeds. City council is left to figure out how to interpret the vote. Passes an ordinance taken to court. And in order to preempt that decision, right, the council amends it. Most of those folks don't run again. You get a new council come in. Rent stabilization has been changed. And due to pressure from developers, it's changed again. It was changed again this spring. So the least stable thing about rent stabilization itself is the policy itself. It's changed so much. And when you talk to businesses, the last thing they like is massive policies changing every 6 to 8 months.
Right, but what they hate even more was the most stringent rent stabilization policy in the country, I think. Was it right to start with the most stringent possible policy?
I mean, I worked in sales for a long time. You don't open from a weak bargaining position. And I think that's, you can always scale back, but you can't always scale up. And so I think if you have to start from somewhere, that's a safe place to start. That said, with the recent changes, I've been asked, okay, well, what will have you supporting changes to rent stabilization, rent control? Show me the building, and we've seen reporting, in the Star Tribune and Axios from these developers saying that now, Minneapolis, they're going to artificially slow down building so that way they can raise rents on the buildings they have. They were complaining about rent stabilization over here, but once rent stabilization was removed for new builds, which it was always very lax on new builds, 20 years of nothing. Now that's permanent, now they're claiming that they won't build because of our labor costs. We have a strong union trades community here in St. Paul, and these developers don't necessarily want to pay union wages. They're complaining about materials costs now, which you look at the Trump administration, they threaten tariffs on everybody. Costs are going up. So I think if it wasn't going to be rent stabilization, it's going to be the same argument they're using in Minneapolis, which is we're not going to build because of labor costs, because of interest rates, because of material costs.
But all those things are, I don't know about labor costs, but like interest rates and materials costs is a real thing. And rent stabilization or no, we probably wouldn't be building much right now, right?
It's a long-term investment. If it makes sense to make the investment, you make the investment.
But interest rates are long-term.
Sure, but most of these buildings are built on a 5 to 10 year note. They're not built on a 30-year mortgage. They're on revolving credit. They're rolling over these loans in different loans, and the buildings themselves are chopped up into investment vehicles to generate more revenue on the stock market. So it's not like a family paying off their mortgage. It's a business navigating an asset and flipping and moving around the assets as it can generate more revenue.
So is rent stabilization one of those things that is settled and like we move forward, or are there changes you want to see or are promising in your campaign?
I am not promising any changes. I am promising wait and see. Like I said, the least stable thing about it has been the policy itself. And I've talked to a number of council members who said, look, we need to let this thing cook for a while. We need to see what the effects are. We can't keep coming back to it because it's also a very acrimonious fight. It tears a lot of people apart, and that's the last thing I want to be doing. So, I think we leave it where it is and see what happens next. Will we get the development and building that's promised? Will we see it retreat any further? What do we have in store for St. Paul? There's only one way to find out. Now, the alternative here is that we, instead of waiting for developers, we build this stuff ourselves. The big thing I've been a proponent for is this social housing model that is being used quite successfully in Dakota County, where they put in 1,600 units of housing over the last 10 years that is owned and maintained by the county. It's not run like your public housing is. It serves a variety of needs: seniors, affordable housing, they have townhomes, they have apartments. But the difference is it's democratically controlled. Who's in charge? They are treating their housing that they are building like they treat their water. They have a development committee that is commissioners and residents and neighbors who are determining the future of their housing rather than a stockholder meeting.
So I've heard a lot of good things about that, and it makes me wonder, what are the downsides? Why are more local governments not taking up that model? Why do you think that is? Can you explain what people see as the downsides?
Well, I think there's always something to be said about caution and moving in a conservative financial direction. It's a gamble, it can feel like, right? We're so privileged to have a successful example nearby because we can pick up that model and run with it. For a long time, I don't think people were willing to give local government a thought. And let's turn left here.
Go on the street?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, so I don't think people were willing to give local government the chance to be a doer like this. A lot of times local government is seen as reacting. Oh, we got this crisis or that. We can move on to the bridge and take the bike path over here.
Are we going back to Minneapolis? What is this bridge?
So this is the Forward Avenue Bridge. So this is actually, if we want to pause here, this is actually one of the big fights right now, is the Highland Bridge project.
Is it still a fight?
It's a fight because the developer, Orion has made it one. So rent stabilization.
Over the very like strip mall style development that they got approved recently?
Yep, so that's one of the pieces of it. They've also, and that's in spite of receiving a bunch of tax increment financing, or TIF, from the city. You know, it's meant to be this tool of last resort for development, but in St. Paul, it's become this poison pill that we are asked to swallow every time we want a new building. And this entire site is fueled by and funded by TIF, to the point where, you know, we've cut our legs out from under us on property taxes, giving it away to a developer to please develop the site. You know, long term, maybe it'll be worth it. But if people's property taxes are going up 65% every year, you know, 25 to 65, we're gonna have, this thing's not gonna be paid off by the time we've lost a lot of our legacy residents to neighboring cities.
I remember the fight over whether it would get built at all, the whole site. And yeah, how much is there left to build?
I feel like we're probably looking at about a third of the project, if I had to guess. It's not in Ward 4, so...
A third is completed, or a third left to go?
Probably a third. If I had to guess, just from riding around it and getting to know it, I go to the doctor over there, because it's right on the A-line. It's very convenient. You know, it looks like there's still about a third left, but it's not in Ward 4. It hasn't been a big thing that I'm focusing on day to day.
Is it where that CVS? The CVS, is that in Ward 4? That's notorious.
It's smack dab in the middle. Yeah, it's
and it
my
closed,
worst neighbor.
right?
Yeah, it's been closed 3 years.
And it's become a problem and a controversy, and a lot of livability concerns, homelessness and addiction, right at the center of that. How do you deal, obviously getting people housed, providing services is important. What do you say to people who live near it and have livability concerns, who see it as an emergency that needs to be solved like right now? How do you solve it right now?
Well, my ex lives at Snelling University. I live at Fairview University. So we're the folks who are living right next to it. We want to solve it right now because my daughter's 6 and I don't feel comfortable taking her on the train. Certainly not getting off at the Snelling Avenue station. You know, Fairview is different, Hamlin's different, but Snelling is something else. What do we do? I mean, there's a couple different places to look. First, you got to look at the blight from CVS. They've been squatting on this property, and they pay only, I think, like $7,000 a year in vacancy fees to keep it closed and vacant. Trash blows around. They put up a big chain link fence because people were camping in the parking lot. You know, so holding them accountable through citations, which is a ballot measure we have to approve in November, is really important because we don't have any tools really other than the vacancy fees to hold them accountable.
Is the ballot measure inspired by the CVS issue, or? No,
the ballot measure is inspired by people who do not want the city to leverage fines against organizations or people. We had to make a charter change in St. Paul to allow that to happen. And as things go, some people didn't want that to happen, and so it's a ballot measure, and it'll be resolved in November.
So it's people who don't want fines and fees levied against vacant properties. Is that...
Vacant properties, businesses,
yeah. So you're trying to stop a thing
enforcement,
that would
yeah.
stop
They're trying to
enforcement.
limit the enforcement tools.
Is that
of the
pushed
city.
by landlords?
I'll be honest, I don't know whose interest it is to not have the city enforcing its own ordinances.
I mean, is there no shadowy group behind this, or is it just
I think
like...
it's people who are just, you got your conservatives who
libertarians?
are, your right-wingers who are afraid of big government.
Somebody got one too many "you didn't shovel your sidewalk" citations, and like, this is unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do?
Oh.
But so, you know, there's the actual CVS itself, right? But the CVS is part and parcel of a larger problem, which is, you know, homelessness and addiction in St. Paul and in the Twin Cities. I mean, fentanyl's devastating. Now, I mentioned I lost my mom to it. It doesn't take a lot, and it's infiltrating a lot of recreational drugs. And fentanyl's unlike any other drug people take. It's it's so potent for the amount that you need. It's very cheap, it's very accessible, it's very quick to get addicted to. And so when we talk about, public safety, that's when I talk about public health approaches. I mean, you're not going to get people sober by slapping cuffs on them and giving them tickets, and you're not going to make people safe by, hitting them with Narcan when they overdose and letting them run off. We really do need to consider a bear hug approach, really. I mean, I've talked about suicide in a similar manner. Suicide, if you attempt suicide, it's illegal to do it because it's an opportunity for the state and the city and the community to intervene and say, we want you here. And the only way we can make sure that you're here is, by making it illegal. It's an intervention point, right? In public health, we talk about intervention points. When we talk about overdoses, that's an intervention point. What do we do? And we need to find a way to address it with humanity and compassion and seriousness. You won't find me saying, defund the police, because we're gonna need them.
Is that a thing? Is that an attack line that is common in St. Paul like it is in Minneapolis? Like if you're a progressive candidate, this person's a defunder, they want to abolish the police. Is that what people say?
I mean, you can ask the folks who are sending me hate mail all the time. They certainly seem to think so.
They have you pegged as that candidate.
Yeah, and then, like I said, my dad was a police officer. I have no interest in ripping away the police department and throwing it in the bin because violent crime is real. A lot of people critique leftists for saying, well, crime in cities isn't real. Well, no, it is. It's a part of everyday life. It's how we respond that is different. How do we respond? My dad, the one thing that I would always say is, I'm not a social worker. He'd go to a domestic call, he'd go to some sort of challenging situation, and he would be unequipped to handle the challenges there because he was trained to be a police officer, to deal with violent situations, to do parking, traffic enforcement, those sorts of things. So if we're not even giving our first responders the tools to do the job we're asking them to do, then how can we expect them to succeed? How can we expect to have a safer community for everybody? That's the approach I'm bringing, is we need to bring everything to the table. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about substance use recovery. We need to talk about communications around, how do you report things you see on the train? People need to feel comfortable calling 911. And in the wake of George Floyd's murder, people are very nervous about calling the police. Even in our neighborhood, they don't want Midway to be next. The next ground zero for something like that. We're still living in the shadow of the uprising in a lot of ways.
So tell us what distinguishes you from the other candidates. There are 4 candidates in this race, including you. How are you different? What are the people not getting with the others that they get from you? I want a real hard-hitting, these people are awful, I'm the best.
That's
give me
what
one
you
of
want?
those. Give me one of those style answers.
All right. Look,
No, just tell me, lay it out in very clear terms for people, because a lot of people will just use buzzwords in a question like this.
absolutely. Well, here's the deal. We're dealing with a public health crisis in St. Paul when it comes to opioid overdoses, and there's not a single person in City Hall who sits on City Council or sits in the mayor's office who is a public health professional and has worked with the people who are suffering. I have been at encampment support meeting. I've done mutual aid. I've been at encampment evictions. That's actually the first place I met Melvin Carter. I met Mayor Carter at an encampment eviction. There's no one in this race who has spent more time in the neighborhood addressing the problems of the neighborhood than I have. I know the folks who are at the corner. I know the folks who are at City Hall trying to make this city a better place. I have Sean Kershaw's number in my phone. I've had it for years. Do you want somebody who can start the job on the right foot right away, or do you want somebody who's going to be spending a lot of time making relationships, spending a lot of time working on policy briefs? These things are already done. Our neighbors are already telling us what they want to do. And I've facilitated those meetings because I've been doing this work for years. It's not an issue of qualification. Everybody's qualified in their own way, but I don't think you need to go to college somewhere else or have years of business experience to be the best candidate for this race. You need to know what's going on. and you need to have the expertise and honestly the energy and commitment to do it. I'm answering all of my I'm answering emails from people who want to vote, or people are just curious about my policy, same day. I write my communications myself. Everybody who says they're undecided at a door, I'm calling them personally to ask for their vote, because that's what democracy means to me. It means getting in your face. It's a contact sport. I want to hear from you. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. Whatever, I get it. We're all busy people. But if you do have a concern, if you have something you want from the city, I'm gonna be asking you. I want to know, because we can't make this thing work if you don't believe that it can work, if you don't believe the city can deliver. And I know it can. I'm a real believer. I know the city can deliver for everyday people. But it's gotta have the right people in the right rooms, and I'm that person in this race.
Well, one thing I can tell you about Cole Hanson, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, is I would not be covering the Ward 4 City Council race in St. Paul if you had not contacted me. Because then I felt compelled. Well, if I said yes to you, and I'm thinking, oh no, how many candidates are there? And I looked it up, and it's like, there are 3 more. Oh. And it's a bike ride. I'm going on a bike ride with one of the other ones. This is going to be a lot of work for me. So this is a plug for patreon.com/Wedge Live. This is so much work. But Cole Hanson, thank you for bringing me over to St. Paul, although we're in Minneapolis right now. Bold choice to bring us back to Minneapolis for half of this ride.
Well, hey, here's the thing. These are the Twin Cities. We got to solve these problems together. Ward 4 sits right against Minneapolis. If you guys are having trouble on the light rail, we are too.
Yeah.
If you guys are having trouble on the bridges, you're having trouble with mass transit, we are too. I don't see them as separate places. We need to work together, and it's a lot more fun that way.
Yeah, I refer to Ward 4 as the Ward 10 of St. Paul because it stretches from swanky to far less swanky, is the way I put it.
Well, we've got a lot fewer wards, so we have a lot more opportunity for the real spread, that's true. But no, I reached out to you because I think it is so important for folks, in Minneapolis and your audience to understand that we are in this together. When we talk about the challenges from the federal government, what the Trump administration is doing, they're snatching our kids and our neighbors, right? We're not going to succeed in protecting everyday people if we're going our own way. We need to have coordinated responses, and that starts at the neighborhood level, that starts with folks, you and me, that's out of city council, that's in the mayor's office. We've got to work together because we're all we've got.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cole Hanson, city council candidate in Ward 4 in St. Paul. When is the special election? What's the date?
August 12th.
And early voting is
happening?
happening?
It's a special election. There's early voting's already happening, but this is it. This is not going in November. It's just on August 12th.
Okay. Well, stay tuned for more episodes coming shortly. I don't know when this will air, but I'm your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. YouTube.com/Wedge Live to watch us ride bikes. Thank you for listening and watching.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.